Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with creative entrepreneur and graphic recorder Ashton Rodenhiser. She is constantly passionate about spreading the concept that drawing can be used as a thinking tool. Anyone, whether they are students or boardroom executives, can benefit from the visual note-taking. Even if you feel like you can't draw, it's possible to learn basic drawing elements to help you benefit from drawing your notes. For the past 7 years, she has followed her passion for helping people communicate their ideas and combine that with creativity by finding Mind's Eye Creative Consulting. Enjoy this interview.
Well, hey, thank you for taking a minute out to be on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for asking.
You bet. So before we get into your life and your work and what has made you who you are, the last 3 years with COVID has been something that's done a turn on everybody in its own specific way. So I'm curious over this last 3 years, how you survived the COVID time period and how it's changed the way that you live your life and conduct business now.
Yeah, I did pivot a lot of my work online, which worked out very well for me, actually. Was actually a blessing in disguise, and I was traveling so much extensively for the work that I do. And I, right before COVID, was trying to figure out ways to be able to work from home more, like having 3 small kids and traveling so much just wasn't working well. And, but yeah, I was really fearful of what that would look like for me because I'm so used to being in person. And then COVID happened. So it was one of those you get what you wish for kind of situations. And, so I was able to sort of move most of my work online. Of course, it looked a lot different in many aspects, but yeah, I honestly can't complain. And I feel like I'm bad saying that sometimes because, so many people struggled so much during COVID times, and I definitely honor that. But yeah, it definitely made me realize lots of different ways of how I wanted to configure my life moving forward. And being home and being forced to be home was actually really good for me and my family, and able to work and scale what I do actually a lot easier than being in person and having to travel around and spending so much time traveling. I didn't realize the cognitive load and the stress that caused until I didn't have to do it anymore, and it was really nice, actually. So I think some people think that travel is, very exciting, and in one aspect it definitely is, but it has a certain element of stress, having to be at certain places at certain times and time zones and sleeping in weird places and all of that. It's I didn't have to do that, obviously, with COVID time. So, I feel like I have a little bit more flexibility moving forward with my work now and being able to choose things, whereas before I was more forced into doing it, because if I said no to a job, that might have meant I didn't make any money that week or month or whatever, right? So
let's get to the essence of exactly what you do. So if I was to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids at a career day, and let's say third graders, and one of the kids looks up at you and asks you, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
That's a great question to a child. I would say that I'm a professional doodler. So if you like to doodle in your notebook when you're in class, you can make a job out of that. So that's what I would probably tell them.
So how would you explain to me what you do for a living?
So I would say I'm a live illustrator that works in situations where there's a lot of complicated conversation going on and trying to get through some of the complexities of what people are talking about and creating a visual representation of those complexities. And because most people think in pictures and, they would consider themselves a visual learner, and we all know the quote, a picture's worth 1,000 words, it resonates with most people in the room, even if they can't articulate why. So I'm there to elevate the voices and the ideas that come out of sessions and meetings and conferences so that people can actually remember what the heck happened, what everybody actually said, what everybody agreed to and to actually do that work that, you had gathered to talk about.
So when you were in grade school, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a mermaid. Does that work?
Yes, it does.
I actually really struggled. Like I was, very smart through school. I didn't have to study really hard, but still got really good grades. Like I probably could have went and did anything. And I definitely felt the pressure to go off and take a lot of post-secondary education. But to be completely frank with you, in high school, I didn't have any career aspirations. I knew I wanted to be a mother at some point. So I did decide to do some college, which was around early childhood education, because I figured it was a transferable skill. I could work with kids until I had my own, because I didn't really have, there was no job or career that I thought I wanted to do. The only thing that did interest me, which I actually did start down the education path, I took all the prerequisites to be a sign language interpreter. And, which is really funny that was something that I had considered, because it's actually extremely similar in the aspect of the work that I do now, because I could call myself a visual interpreter in one regard, right? So I think I've always been really fascinated with, communication, and I've always done that with children. But yeah, and how I kind of ended up here was working at a family center and learned about facilitation work, and which was great. I thought facilitation was awesome, and I did that for a number of years because I love that, you can help people come to their own conclusions through their own information, right? You don't have to be like the expert in the room as a facilitator. And that's honestly what led me to this work, because I didn't know that this work existed until I did facilitation. And then someone asked me one time if I'd ever heard of graphic facilitation, and I was like, what's that? And after doing some digging and doing a little bit of classes, I was like, this is it. And that was 10 years ago. So
very cool. So who's been one of your favorite artists or designers who's always inspired you?
Oh, I love this question. So where I live here in Nova Scotia, Canada, there is a famous artist, and her name is Maud Lewis. And she actually grew up about a 2-hour drive away from me. And she actually became a very famous folk artist in Canada. And she lived in a very, very small home, which the house actually exists. They moved the house into the art gallery here in the city, and a very, very tiny home, like 100 square feet or something like that. And she had juvenile arthritis, so she was quite crippled. She had a hard time walking, and her hands were, she really struggled with her hands. And her husband was a boat builder, and they lived very poorly. And he would bring home pieces of wood and boat paint, and she created these folk art pieces with just materials that she got from him. And when I was in college, I actually had to do a project on her, and about how that, her work, basically I had to create an activity of what kids could do with Maud Lewis inspired work. And I had always been very creative and tried lots of different mediums, but I kind of had fallen by the wayside because I had a teacher one time telling me I did something wrong. And then I think a lot of people have this experience where, they think that they can't be creative anymore because someone said that they did something wrong, or they were, not encouraged. And anyway, so I did have an experience like that, and I felt like it wasn't really for me. And then when I learned about her, and I was like, she didn't have any formal education. She just did it from her heart. And all her paintings were so joyous. And yeah, so she was my biggest inspiration, to be honest with you, when I was in college, and I started painting again, and I started doing lots of different art mediums and trying out many different things. Surprisingly, I didn't actually draw a whole lot, which is what I do now, but it did lend itself very nicely into me starting to pick up the paintbrush again, and I don't think I would have been here today if I wouldn't have had that experience of learning about her and her journey and being inspired by her work.
That's great. I bet she would love to have heard that story about, because it sounds like she was just doing it because it's something that she just felt like was coming out of her and it's turned into an inspiration. That's a great story. So, and I love that recycled art piece. I'm actually a visual artist myself, and I do a lot of recycled art pieces, and I think it's great when you can do things like that. So all of us have in our journey, we have these beginnings where things inspire us and get into a seed, so to speak. What were the seeds of creativity for you to make you want to pursue this life and become who you are now?
Wow, yeah, I think my creativity was always encouraged, even though I did fall off of it for a while. I didn't really come from a very creative family necessarily, but like we weren't a sports family either. There was really not, like there wasn't anything that like my family was really like into, if that makes sense. But I was highly encouraged to, like I'm musical, I play like many different instruments, and like that was encouraged. So I think the creative side of being able to like learn how to read music and then being able to use that in learning different instruments. Like I'm currently learning how to play the bagpipes right now just for something to do. And yeah, I think, those seeds were like small planted through my childhood of just trying different things and just being in the process of it. And yeah, I think I almost like felt like I was a bit of like the black sheep a little bit in my family, like the odd creative one, but it was still supported in many ways. So, yeah, I think mostly just sort of small things like that throughout my life. And I've, had people when I've told them like crazy ideas that I've had, like I started an art festival in my town and, when was that? 2012, like I started an Art at Night festival in my town, and someone that I respected, I told him the crazy idea I had, and he was like, go for it, right? So I think having some of those people that can listen to your wild and crazy ideas and tell you to go for it was pretty important in my life too. So, like I don't think I'd be where I am today without some of that as well. Of feeling like, one, I could create a business, one, I could create this odd creative business, so having some of those supports. I've been, and trying not to like listen to anybody who tells me otherwise, basically.
For sure. Yeah, you gotta march to your own beat, for sure. So in your life, who's been a role model or a consistent hero for you?
Oh my gosh. That is a great question. I think throughout I don't know, maybe this feels like a little cliche to say it, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think because I started my business after my first child was born, I think my kids have been like an inspiration for me. And for many different ways. Like they're only 4, 7, and 9 right now, but it was shortly after it was around, my first child was only 6 months old when I started getting into this work. And, being able to kind of showcase to them what I can do and that I can do my own thing. And they inspire me with their like playfulness and their joy, which I think because there's like so much element of playfulness and joy in what I am creating for clients and for people, like I have to stay in that space even when like I'm in stressful situations or like the meeting I'm entering in is like really tense. Like they ground me in that sense of play, if that makes sense. So, I like drawing with them and like my 4-year-old did this thing with me just a couple weeks ago where she would draw something and I would follow her, right? And like she created some really interesting drawings for me to copy off of her, and I was like, I'm going to use this in my work. Like just that like no worrying about, did I create something quote unquote good or letting go of some of that perfectionism and all of that. They really like inspire that too.
So if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh my goodness, these are such great questions. Who would I want to meet? I think I would want to meet Ani DeFranco because she's always been my favorite. I think she's such a cool lady. She also marches to the beat of her own drum. She's like a self-starter. She's so unique. She's so poetic. I've just been a fan of hers for 20 years. So I think I would want to meet her. I know she's not like a visual artist, but she's a cool lady. I honestly think she and I would have a good time having a conversation. Yeah.
That's my wife's favorite musician, and she actually came to Kansas City, and I caught her live. Yeah, we caught her before the pandemic started. I remember it was in February. It was really cold. Yeah, it was a pretty good show.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome. So, all of us have ways, things that we want to do with our lives, motivations to get out of bed and get through the day and to accomplish what we want. What's that motivator for you? What gets you going? What makes you be who you are?
I would say for the work, like what motivates me to get out of bed and show up for work every day is trying to educate people that they can use drawing as a thinking tool. I think we look at art, and this was sort of my idea when I created the art festival too, is like we have this notion of art and it's so untouchable. And I'm always looking for creative ways, in work and otherwise, to educate people and show people and allow them to have experiences for themselves that they can experience creativity for the sake of creativity, and it can help them just experience something new and interesting and allow them to think differently or think something about the world. Whereas we've created, I feel a space where art is something to be seen, not to be experienced. And, unless you consider yourself creative, maybe you understand some of that philosophy. But I think for the average everyday person, they just go, oh, I'm not creative. Or when I tell people what I do, they're like, oh, I can't even draw a straight line, or oh, I can't even draw a stick person. And I'm like, well, stick person's still pretty good. I know I've graduated from a stick person with my work, but stick people are still great to help communicate an idea. You can still draw something even if you feel like your drawings aren't quote unquote good. I think it's this notion of art and drawing and creativity. It has to, there's so much focus on the product and not the process of it. So I think that's what sort of drives me in my work and in my life, of trying to allow people to have these positive experiences and just the process of being creative. And if I can, allow someone to feel that they're not creative, and then they have experience with something that I can offer, or an experience I can allow them, something that I can help them through, then they think, oh, maybe I am a little creative. I feel like I've won the day, because everyone's creative in their own way. And I feel like we just don't, especially as adults, I think that's why I take so much inspiration from my children, because they don't have that, thinking that they're not creative. If you ask most kids, under the age of 10, if they're an artist, they just say yes, right? So how can we get back to embracing creativity, believing that we have it, because we all do.
Yeah, one of my favorite poets, Charles Bukowski, said that we're born geniuses and buried idiots. It's the amount of walls that we put up around ourselves is astonishing, and especially as people get older, it's easier to say no than it is yes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, and with that being said, and I don't know if you ever heard this story, but the way that John Lennon fell in love with Yoko Ono, Yoko had a art show, I think it was in London, and it was just a ladder that went up to a painting that was all yellow, and in the middle of it, it said yes really small, but you had to take a magnifying glass hanging down from a piece of string and put it up there, and it magnified it. And that was it. That was the moment.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah.
So let's say you have a dream tonight, you run into a younger version of yourself, and like in your 20s, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained, the life you've led so far. What would you tell your young version?
I think I would tell my younger version that oh my gosh, I think I would tell them that it's possible. Like what you're dreaming right now, and it's like a little seed of an idea and you don't think you can do it, like it is possible, and you'll be surprised what you see on the other side. You just have to get through it. And I probably warned them about all the rejection that they're going to face, and that is totally fine. That it's okay that you're going to get like a million no's, and like a million no's isn't going to crush you. You'll actually be totally fine hearing a million no's. So I think I would warn them. I think I would warn the younger version of myself about that. What's the one art gallery, or what's the one artist that you've seen that blew you away? Well, besides Mom Lewis, she's always my number one. I've been really into like Indigenous art lately. And I actually was just my birthday recently, and I went to the art gallery for my birthday, and I really like took in a lot of the Indigenous artists in there. And there's an artist here, I think it's Alan Syllaboy. There's a couple Syllaboys around here who are artists, and that their work really inspires me. I've always felt like really connected to like the Indigenous folks that live here called the Mi'kmaq people, and I've always really admired the like bright colors, because like I'm attracted in my work with bright colors. Like I use a lot of bright colors in my work, and like they use a lot of bright colors and like, you know, lots of thick black lines, which I like too. And they're just so connected to the world around them and the earth and how these elements work together. So yeah, I would say that's sort of like what I've been really appreciating a lot lately is the work of many Mi'kmaq artists around where I am. Yeah.
Of all of the things that you've done in your life so far, what are you the proudest of?
What am I the proudest of? I think I'm the proudest of my self-awareness. You know, recently I was in a bookstore looking at the whatever quote-unquote self-help section, and one of the workers came by and asked if I need help, and I said, is it a good thing or a bad thing that I've read most of these books? So I think I'm proud of my growth. I definitely wouldn't be where I am today without taking time to read books and listen to podcasts and do that like deeper self-work. You know, going to therapy, going to group therapy, like looking at things, you know, it's not easy. I think that's why a lot of people don't do it. It's not easy to look at these things about yourself and dissect things. And I think I'm most proud around that work that I've done to grow and develop as a human, because I think it allows me to show up for myself, you know, to be the best version of myself that I can be. It allows me to be, I think, a positive role model for my family. And I think it allows me to show up, you know, as authentic as I can with like the best spirit that I can in the work that I do.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, you know, your family, your friends, clients, colleagues, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I would say I am like a manifestation of creativity. I know we were just talking about that, but I think that's it. Like I would say if someone asked me like what's my biggest, like if I just had like one value, I think it would be around creativity. because I think it just like manifests in every aspect of my life. Like, we are creative people, and like I embrace everything in my life, or I try to, unless I'm having a bad day, maybe, from a lens of curiosity through creativity. That's where, like, I was just telling one of my kids the other day, I'm like, people created all this stuff. Like, we were in the city. I was like, everyone created. Like, people, like, aren't people creative? Like, aren't people interesting? Because, like, they created these things, like that iPad you're using and these pens we're using and all this stuff. Like, everything in our world is from someone having a creative idea and actually sharing that into the world. So, I think it's just, for me, it's like I'm like a force of creativity and like honoring that and expressing that, even when you're not feeling, like even when you've got like imposter syndrome creeping in when you're trying to do something or whatever, just embodying that sort of creative spirit.
So what's been one of the best responses you ever got from your work, fan letters, so to speak?
I do feel like I've, throughout the years, have weeded through people that I work with. So most of my people are pretty amazing. I'm not going to lie. The people that I do work with, I would say, well, I'll say this. Maybe it's just like my brag story, but a couple years ago, before the pandemic, I was in Copenhagen and I was on stage with Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. That was pretty terrifying. So getting like a nod from him was pretty cool. Like, he didn't say anything, but he was like, oh, cool, It's, I don't like necessarily putting people on a pedestal, but it was pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. It was absolutely terrifying, but it was pretty cool. And I did, the year before that, I had drawn a conversation with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. And he came over and talked to me while I was on the stage with him. So, like, that was pretty crazy. So I've had some situations like that. But, those aside, a couple of years ago, I was working at a fish plant, actually, of all places. And we were working with all of the employees in small groups, trying to ask them one question, which was, how does this company show you that they care? And I had an older gentleman. He was definitely well into his 70s. Like, he should have been retired for sure. And he came up at the end and he said, I've been working here for 40 years. He's like, no one has ever asked me how I felt before. And, even though that was like, wow, like maybe 7 years ago now or so, it still sticks to me today, the power that this type of work has. And being able to show up and support people and allow people to have a voice, those are the stories that tend to stick with me the most of those types of situations where people feel like maybe they haven't had a voice. And with the power of my marker, if I'm able to help them have a voice, then that's just such an honor of a place to be. So, yeah, it's cool to be on stage with Steve Wozniak and all of that, but those are like the small moments that really stick with me, that, keep me going and knowing how powerful this type of creative medium can help people feel seen and feel heard.
That's wonderful. Ashton, thank you for opening up. Thank you for your stories. And before we get out of the proverbial digital door, let everybody know where they can find you on the web.
Sure. I think the most place I hang out is Twitter, to be honest with you. And that's Mind's Eye CCF. And my website is mindseyecreative.ca. I do have a book coming out in spring of 23. You can keep an eye out, called The Beginner's Guide to Sketchnoting. So if you want to learn how to draw your own notes in meetings, you can keep an eye out for that. And if you, in the meantime, I have a little 15-minute workshop that people can grab a little video of me helping you walk through drawing your very first sketch note. And people can see that on my website, or they can go to sketchnote101.com and get the information for that. So.
Wonderful. Ashton, this has been great. Thank you for opening up. Best of luck with everything.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you today and for asking such interesting questions.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.